ChatGPT, like it has really,
Yeah.
done wonders for me. Even like drafting legal contracts, uh, the first versions of that at least, it really saved me because I had to get one out the next day, and it was like 11 p.m. in the night. So I didn't really have any time to get lawyers or anyone involved. So be it legal contracts, be it content writing, be it code, um, this like is a really
Yeah.
big time saver
Well,
for me.
ChatGPT can score in the top 10 percentile now of on the bar exam. It's like a combined score of 297, which is like 90th percentile.
I wouldn't be
It's absolutely
surprised.
crazy.
You know
Yeah.
what I was surprised by? That the contract that I sent was passed without any reviews.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today we're delighted to have Royal Jain on the program. He's the co-founder, CEO of CodeParrot, also a Team Ignite portfolio company we're lucky enough to invest in. Royal, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Brian, for having me here today.
Likewise. Would love to get an intro from you for the audience.
Yeah. So as Brian mentioned, I'm the co-founder of CodeParrot. Before this, I've started another company, but let me take you chronologically. I started my career as a computer science student in IIT Bombay, and then I spent a lot of time figuring out what not to do. So first, being a computer science student, I went to a software company, a big software company, as I supposed I should. And I used to love Japan just because of the anime. So I thought I'll do an
Does love
internship in
Japan.
Japan.
Yeah, it's amazing there.
It's amazing.
Oh
The
wow.
place was really amazing, but the work, it
You
was
did this during
really
college, during your IIT.
IIT Bombay,
You went
yeah.
to Japan for.
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
So during my bachelor's, I also met my wife there, but that's a different story. Apart from that, the
Hmm.
trip was not worth it because the work was really, really boring. So that made me realize that probably that's not the career path for me. And then I thought like the next logical step was I was very interested in machine learning. So I thought I'll go and do a PhD. But to figure that out, I went to a research lab. I also did an internship over there in Xerox Research. And again, like the people there were amazing. But after interacting with them for like few months, I realized I can't spend like 10, 15 years working on a single problem statement. That's not for me. And so then I dropped that as well. And then I
That's my
started again.
problem as well. I can't spend 15 years working on a single thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that would drive me mad, really. So then I
Yeah.
thought, like, what's next? So I figured I like machine learning, I like software development, and I like money. So maybe quantitative finance is for me. So I joined Morgan Stanley. I worked there as a quant, and initially the work was really interesting. Like quantitative finance, just as a way of learning new things, is really interesting. But after
Yeah.
like a year or so, you stop learning new things and then you have to start contributing, right? And there it's like you are a part of a really large machine, right? So for let's say 2 consecutive quarters, you'll be fixing small things and then just seeing how the impact would be on a day-to-day basis. You're not really doing that much. And that sort of got me thinking, is this really what my potential is, or is this what all I can do? And that made me sort of like a bit sad that this is not how it should be. And at the same time, some of my friends were working in like startups, early stage startups, and they seemed happy. So I thought, why not like give that a try? So I
Right.
joined a company, really early stage startup. It was called DeepFX. I was the first employee over there. We were building machine learning models for voice data. So problems like voice cloning or emotion identification, all those sort of problems we were tackling and trying to build models and trying to see where they are fitting. And that's when I realized like it's like you find a cool problem that you want to work on. You find whether that makes business sense, whether people are willing to pay for it, and then you figure out a way to build, right? And that's pretty much it. But like at that time, I used to think, isn't like this is not what I'm supposed to be doing because this is like a adult work, and I've just recently graduated out of college. So I like our co-founders the same thing, and they said like, yeah, ideally this should be done by people who know what they're doing, but you are all we have. So, and that's when I thought like this is the place for me. Startups are really interesting. because you can make a great impact. You can work on interesting problems. That's when I thought like this is what I should be doing. Spent some time over there and then wanted to start my own company. And then I left DeepFX without any clue on what to start on. I just left the company. I thought I'll like figure out something and spent 9 or 10 months just figuring out things, making a lot of things which nobody wanted, trying to find co-founders, and it didn't work out a couple of times. So spend a lot of times just going back and forth, and then I realized it's not as easy as it seems as well. But then I found a problem that I wanted to work on, and it was in EdTech space. And so in India, what happens is schooling is broken to a large extent. I'm sure everywhere in the world, but in India, I think it's
I think
pretty
everybody
great.
feels that way. Maybe the Scandinavian countries don't, right? But
Maybe,
yeah,
maybe. But like in India, especially, I felt like that because you have
yeah.
the teacher to student ratio here is really poor. Like you'll have 60 odd students in one class, and there will not be any personal attention to it, right? So a lot of very often students develop a lot of the learning gaps, which then compound over years. And to help with that, there's a culture of after school tuition that there'll be some sort of teacher or maybe your uncle or aunt in the society who'll help you with that homework. But that's like just a band-aid solution, not a great way to cover those learning gaps. And that's what we were like, I wanted to solve. And I met my co-founder while working on that problem statement, which resonated with him as well. And then we started working on it. We realized, like, again, in India, there's a special need for English as a language. Like, we are taught English in a very rote learning lot of kind of way that
Mm.
grammar, yes, reading comprehension, yes, but not really how to speak well, not really how to speak fluently. And that is one problem that a lot of parents can't help their kids with as well. So we started this public speaking, language fluency courses, online courses in India, and it started doing really well. Then we scaled it up. We got acquired by a large EdTech company called Unacademy in India. We spent some time over there, lots of highs, lots of lows. Spent around 2 years over there. And being the CTO, I was always very interested in developer tooling as a space. So then when I left Unacademy, I wanted to start again. And that's when I started CodeParrot. That's pretty much like what led me to here.
Wow, so much to unpack there. What a cool journey. And we'll definitely get into CodeParrot. I'm sure the audience wants to hear all about that. But it's funny how many people I run into, or maybe it's serendipitous, or maybe it's we see the struggle in each other, which is this disillusionment that occurs when you work in finance. You know, because I had the same problem in my mid 20s. You know, like I worked really hard. You know, was an analyst working 80-hour weeks, 100-hour weeks, whatever it was, and just like I was like, this, there's got to be more to life. This sucks, right? And so it's just funny that you had that exact same experience. But maybe you could unpack a little bit of the highs and lows of this acquisition by Unacademy, and kind of, for the founders out there that might be getting acquisition offers. How do you know? Like, walk us through some of those highs and lows, and when did you know it was the right time to sell, and what would you have done maybe differently?
Right. So I think there's a lot of pros and cons, and the correct answer again depends on the context. For us, the people at Unacademy were really great to us. They gave us a lot of freedom to experiment. They gave us a lot of support in terms of financial freedom so that we can go all out and do lots of things that we wanted to. So that was really great. And any acquisition that anyone is planning, it's very important to know the other side. And sometimes there are like artificial deadlines that we need to complete the deal by this time and all those things. But it's important to like push back, get recommendation from lots of people who have known the founders or the people on the other side, because at the end of the day, the contract is just a piece of paper. What relationship you have with the other team is going to matter a lot, right? The second thing which people should be aware of is that once you get acquired, your future is not completely under your control. And it's not a good or a bad
Mm.
thing from a person's side. It's just the nature of how things is. If the company which is acquiring you they are, let's say, in a growth mode, then you will also be by default in a growth mode. You will be given a lot of money, you can do lots of fun things. But on the other side, if they want to become profitable really quickly, then so do you, right? And those sort of, and what we realize is like the changes in business model are much slower than the investor sentiment. So back then, when like 21, 22, the investor sentiment changed really quickly, but our business model couldn't. So we had to do lots of adjustments, which included layoffs, which weren't great at all, which included lots of price increase, lots of those things to make the business more profitable. And it was a hard thing to do. So that is one thing that you as a founder should be aware of, that you are giving up that freedom, and hopefully what you're getting in return is worth that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so you know, stated just to paraphrase what you said, it's like you got to make sure there's a cultural fit, right? Because fundamentally, you're working with other people that may have different ways of doing things, and then two, you might be entering a different kind of business focus, right? Of growth versus cash cowing, right? And I've seen this with companies that get acquired, right? You go from I won't name names, but I've been through it, and I've had a lot of friends go through it in Silicon Valley, where they're in this high growth meritocracy culture. Everything's up and to the right. Everybody's growing every year, getting more headcount, like more revenue, like, and all of a sudden you get acquired by this conglomerate tech company, and like the conglomerate tech company is now treating you as a cash cow. They want a financial return. It's almost like a private equity play, and now they're kind of looking at all the headcount, like, and they stop caring so much about the vision, and they start bean counting, right? They start caring a lot about the numbers, which is a different culture. It's not as fun. But
Exactly.
switching gears to CodeParrot, like, tell us what's the inception? What is CodeParrot? What is the mission there?
Right. So it's basically a product to help front-end engineers build better designs. So it converts designs to code, maintainable code, which really fast tracks their development. But there's a bit of a journey for that. So we started CodeParrot as a API testing product, like automation of API testing. And that's when Brian invested in us. And since then we have pivoted. So that's on Brian. But we spent
back on the horse.
Okay. So we spent like 4 or 5 months just trying to make that a success. What we wanted to do is help software teams automate testing and be really free what they can release and not, right? And but we face a lot of those challenges, like complete automation is not really possible in that field. Whether you're really adding value or not, that's a really big question. It took us a long time to realize that.
Do you feel like it's a timing issue with that? Like, do you feel like it's just like it's a great idea, but the time hasn't come yet? Is it just a little too early?
I think it's a business model issue. I don't think it's a VC fundable model. Like, there will be good AI tools which will help in productivity for certain users, maybe the QA teams. But how much money you can make of that, I really doubt that. Because if you
so the issue is like the buyer doesn't really want to pay for it.
The buyer cares for like the speed at which you can turn around, you can do the testing, and whether their 4 or 5 critical flows are working, like the payment flow, the user registration, right? The AI tools, what they give you an advantage over is that they can provide more comprehensiveness, but at a cost. And the cost usually is developer time, and nobody wants to pay that. So that is like the broader challenge with that field. But I do think like there'll be newer tools which will be better than the current ones, but I don't think it will change fundamentally that much. So we spent like quite a few months just trying to make that a success, and then realize that's not we should be doing, and we should figure out a real problem statement and with a real solution. So we pivoted from that, and then we were basically searching for an idea in the developer tooling space. So we spent like next 3 to 4 months figuring out different ideas. We would spend 2 to 3 weeks on one idea, create a demo for it, try to find customers. And our approach was, we get customers, we start building. But over those next 3 months, what you realize is that every time we create a demo, it looks so unprofessional that more like even before we get to the features and the solution and the value proposition, users will come and say like, it doesn't ignite the trust that this is an actual working product that I should be paying for. So then we started using a lot of these LLM tools like Copilot to build better demos. And then it finally clicked to us, maybe this is the product that we should be building. We need it, probably like others need it too. So we created like a very quick version in a couple of weeks, which was really broken. And then we sent it out to our friends to use it. And it was like the user experience was really broken. But we could see like some of the people tried really hard to make it work for them. And that was an interesting point because it had never happened with us earlier that people were taking hours literally to figure out a way to make our product work. So then we thought like there's something more to it. Then we started building again. And at the same time, the one good thing that we did, we didn't wait for the product to be built to start getting customers. So we started doing a lot of content marketing. I started doing a lot of LinkedIn marketing, reach outs, all of that. So we started getting few customers every day. And initially, all of them would drop off, right? Because the product, the onboarding sucked, the product wasn't really there. But it helped us figure out who the ICP was, like who were the set of people who really wanted this at the early stage. And they were
An
really
ICP
early.
meaning ideal customer profile for the audience there, just in case.
Yeah. And like for us, those were early stage founders who were in the in situation like ours, just wanted to create a working demo for someone. So we started building more features for them and got to a few paying customers. And that was like the second important milestone for us that somebody is willing to pay for it. Then we built like further GTM channels for them, more features, expanded the TG, got front end engineers to start buying the product, then engineering managers to buying it for their team, and so on.
It's amazing. So I love this story, right? Because you guys are going down this rabbit hole. You think you're building something people want, and then you realize they don't want it, right? Or they're not willing to pay for it anyway. And then so you're iterating and pivoting through all these different ideas, and in that process, another idea emerges, which I love that magic, right? Of you're iterating through these ideas and like every 3 weeks trying to like find something that people need. And then that process, there's something that like just magically, like you're like, oh yeah, well people need this thing that we're building this tool to solve our problems in this process. Well, everyone has this problem. This is a universal problem. So maybe describe the problem. I mean, as I understand it, it's, hey, I got this really amazing Figma. How do I get code for it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, like, if you look at most of the good websites or the good companies today, they want to stand out. And the first impression as a digital product is the website or the application that you have. Most of the newer tech companies that you see, even let's say in developer tooling space, Supabase, Posthog, when you go to their product, it's a really smooth experience, and that creates the trust for you, and then everything else becomes like a filler. So this first impression that you create as a digital product, it's getting even more important as because for everything there are like 10 more competing products, right? But how do you
Design as
create
the
that?
differentiation. Airbnb was a really good example of that, right? It was design as differentiation. There were other
Exactly.
places you could go rent a home. VRBO was around for years before Airbnb came out, but it was like Airbnb that made it just a seamless, easy, intuitive process. And so you might call that, yeah, design as differentiation.
It is. I think like earlier when there were very few digital products and the saying that just create an MVP and then figure it out, that used to work. But when you have 12 other competing products, why would someone purchase yours? Nobody wants to use the second best product, right? So you need to make it compelling, and the first impression matters. In every company that I have worked in, the designers and the developers, they never get along. It's always like a fight that the designer is complaining
Yeah.
that this is not high, this is not how it should
Where the
be, and the
developers are like, I'm
developer
waiting for your designs. Yeah.
and the
I
developer
can't
is like
code anything. Yeah.
you have made the design so complex, I can't really code it, so I need to make adjustments. And there's always that pushback. And like the product
Yeah.
managers and EMs, they're just waiting for it to end so that they can start
Mm.
their own work. So it's never a smooth process. So um, that's what we are solving. Like according to my estimates, 40% of all development work ever done in software engineering is front end work. And I've never met front-end engineers who are happy just doing CSS changes, fixing something, seeing how it looks, just doing this
No.
process again and again.
You give that to like the interns, like you give that to like the fresh university graduates on their first coding job. Here, yeah, you go do
Exactly.
the HTML, CSS, JavaScript changes on the front end. I'll go
Exactly.
do the
Like
API layer, fun stuff. Yeah,
I've found like I've met front-end engineers who have created new projects so that like the code is abstracted away enough that they don't need to do the UI work and they can get someone else to do it, right? So it's what the math was like 40% of all the development work is front-end work. Nobody wants to do the UI work. There's always a clash between designers and developers. So something needs to be done. When we talked with a lot of developers and we were trying the product, it was never a problem of intent that they didn't want a way to solve this. It was always a problem of reliability, whether it will work or not, because the AI tools have been for design to code have been promised for a long time and they haven't been working. So it was a problem of fatigue, not really the desire. So that's when we thought like the LLM based newer tools can really fill that gap, and that's what we are trying to solve.
amazing. So how do
Right. So basically, say you have a Figma design. So what we do is you submit that Figma design to us. We extract lots of properties from it, like some things like layout, colors, all those basic things. And then we also try to understand what do you mean semantically, whether the rectangle you have drawn, is it a button? Should it have a hover effect? What should be the behavior when it's there on a smaller screen? So that all information we try to pre-process, and it's a lot of manual and hard work that we have to do in a pre-processing step. The second part, which is really important, is how is your current code base, because you don't want just to create some random code and then half of the time you are fixing it to match with your code base. So the second important part of the problem is which, let's say, languages, libraries you're using, what code do you already have. I need to reuse that to create newer pages, newer features. So our main job is to parse all this existing information and find the relevant part of it and send it to LLMs. The hard thing about this is that LLMs have fixed memory, like the context window. If you just send everything and anything, it will not work. The difficult part of the problem is how do you find out what is the relevant information without bugging the developers for it and sending it to LLMs? And the second difficult part of it is once you have gotten the output, is it really correct? Is the screen really responsive? Does the UI look exactly like it should be? And that is the second part of it. Like you prompt further and further that whether this is correct or not. So these are the two things that we provide as the USP in the product.
really interesting. The way I think about it is it's almost like second order SaaS. You are a SaaS platform that helps people build more SaaS faster.
Yes.
Or stated
I
another
mean,
way,
like
it's kind of
in
like it's
B2C.
yeah, it's kind of like this. I spent a better part of a decade building SaaS products as a product manager, and it was always grinding out this problem that you're describing, right? Getting the mocks, getting feedback on the mocks, doing the design iterative cycles, passing it over to engineers, and getting it back, and inevitably doesn't look like the designs, and like all this like this churn. And then Figma
Yeah.
solved a little bit of that because it was kind of like pixel perfect kind of code that now you just have to kind of wire it up a bit. Made it a little faster, a little better, but there's still this like last mile problem that you're solving, which is like, how do I actually get this into the code base? And that's always been kind of the holy grail, is like kind of, I mean, ultimately we just want to like think something and it just like auto generates SaaS around it, but there's like all these like little baby steps to get there. Another way of thinking about it, another analogy I like to think about is like it's GitHub has Copilot, but that's really good when you're sitting in the code and it's just like generating like lines of code for you, predicting what you need.
Mm-hmm.
But this is like kind of it's like UI autopilot.
Yeah.
or level 3 autonomy or something, where you can take the designs and get most of the way there. Now you just got to go through and just kind of check all the code, and it's a lot easier to kind of go read a doc after it's written than start from a blank canvas.
Yeah, exactly. Like one of the earliest signs that we thought that this will be useful is when like we were using ChatGPT and all these Copilot tools, and we realized now we can't do without it. Like now we need a draft to actually start coding and like fixing things. I can't really write from scratch, and it's like a handicap situation as well, but it's also a great productivity thing. I've seen most people who have
Yeah.
started using these tools a lot, including CodeParrot, they get into that zone where this becomes like a second brain for them.
Yeah, I love that. So what's your vision for this in 5 or 10 years? Like CodeParrot looks like what in 5 or 10 years?
So as I was saying, like 40% of development work is front end. What can you do if that took, like, say, 1/10 the time? And that is the problem statement that we are following. For that to happen, first step is getting the designs into the code. The second step is making them really performant. Third is making them searchable, so SEO, ASO, all of that things. So all the things which a front-end developer does, step by step, you want to take that, and it requires a lot of work. It requires integration with different tools. It requires a lot of agentic workflows to be built, and that is where we want to go.
Yeah, amazing. Well, why don't we switch to a rapid fire? What's your favorite programming language?
Fun, C++, more practical, TypeScript. And C++
No
is
one's ever
really
said TypeScript.
C++ is really great. Like but it'll always give you seg fault sometime. And TypeScript is like so versatile now. It's so many libraries, front and back end, both same stack. You find tons of people working on it. So it's just way more practical today.
Yeah. What's a book that inspired you?
I mean, like, I think lots of things like Zero to One and a lot of hard things about hard things, all those are great books. But personally, I feel fiction is what works for me well. There's a series called Foundation by Isaac
Oh, yeah.
Asimov, if you have read. I think that's really great. Not related to startups at all, but it's just really great.
Yeah, many people in tech have read it, right? So there
Right?
must be
Yes.
there must be something there. And a lot of big tech people like Elon will say like that's his favorite series. And um, what's a startup you admire? Maybe one that you wish you founded.
I really think Slack is great. Um,
Mm.
I never would have imagined like a chat application being so helpful. But now we are working with the enterprise and we are doing email only, and that sucks. I mean, that's
Yeah,
so unproductive. And that's where like the respect for Slack has gotten way more for me. And I really like the origin story as well. Like they were building a gaming company, and
right.
while building that, they just built this as a support tool for them internally, and they realized it's a great way to.
Yeah, it's similar to your origin story, right? You're pivoting.
Yeah,
Like the original idea wasn't working, and like it's this, out of the ashes, it's the phoenix.
yeah, I
Code
guess.
Phoenix, you could call the company. What's the biggest challenge you've overcome?
um, I would say there are like two. The first one was just getting started. So when I left my
Mm.
startup job and was trying to start on my own, there are like so many obstacles because as a technical and especially machine learning person, you have no idea how to create a business. Like, I think the idea that you think is that you'll create a model, and that is the hardest part. And once you create that, then it'll just, like work out. So I spent a lot of time just creating models for things which nobody really wanted, and then trying to like find co-founders. So there are like so many ups and downs over a long period where you don't see any tangible progress. You don't have any product, you
Mm.
don't have any users, but then you still get learnings. But that's really hard to see, and especially when you keep on meeting the same people and trying to explain, hey, this
Mm.
takes time, I'm figuring things out. It's never nice. So I think
Yeah.
that was like the hardest thing. The second was the second time I was starting up, because I thought like, I know this now, I know a lot, so this will be way easier. But actually it was the opposite, because it's like, now I know there are so many filters. Market needs to be big. There should be a founder market fit. There should be this and that. And when you try to put all of those filters right at the very start, you can't really find an idea which has all of them, right? So
Yeah.
you keep looking at an idea, then you think about it 1 week
This was always
later.
my problem as an entrepreneur, like because I was a product manager before I started my own startups. And when you're so critical on your own ideas, like when I was a PM, I'm using other people's money and resources to build stuff. And the sales team says we need it. Okay, great. That sounds reasonable. We'll go build it. And like turns out nobody used it, right? And so you're like, oh, okay, whatever. Like dust ourselves off, plan the next sprint, and kind of keep going. But like when you're doing your own thing, you're kind of like, yeah, you just get stuck in analysis paralysis a little bit. You're like, nobody will use
Exactly.
this, and like you start talking to users, and you're like, nobody seems excited about this, and you just kind of get like, it's really hard to like
Yeah,
power through that as a.
exactly. And then it starts feeling like maybe it was just serendipity the first time, and you don't really know much. And I like to call it the curse of the second term founder is rationality. Like we just become too rational, and that prevents you from taking a leap of faith. So I think that was also the hard thing. Again, the
Mm,
learning was so this problem of design to code, this is the original problem I wanted to start off with because this is what I had seen. But the more I thought about it, like the more doubts I started creeping in. What if GitHub
yeah.
Copilot like does it or Figma? And there were like so many other
I
questions
think
which
about
just
this as
came
an
to my mind.
investor all the time. I'm like, isn't this just a feature inside of Figma?
Exactly, right? And I used to talk to investors and as well, and this was again the first question that people would ask me. And the problem is that you can't really preempt all these questions. You have to really spend time doing this to realize whether that is true or not. So, for example, now I know that is not true. It's really hard to build a reliable workflow for building AI or building UI. The problem, as I mentioned, you need to get the correct context, you need to build agentic workflows which are really, really domain specific. But at the start, I didn't, right? So, this is the exact problem
Yeah, I
that
mean,
you
if it was
can't
easy,
really
it would be a
preempt these.
feature inside of these design platforms. Like Adobe would have built it already, Figma would have built it already. Like it'd be there if it was easy,
Exactly.
you know?
Yeah, I mean, like the first time, like again, some people asked me a few weeks ago, what if this is a feature, right? And why will GitHub or Figma will not build it? And my thought process is, why haven't they done so now? It's obviously a big market. It's obviously they have the distribution, but there must be some reason why they haven't. And working in this field, I know that now.
I love that. What's your preferred work environment, office or remote?
Remote. So I became a dad recently, so that is no longer a option for me. But I prefer remote in general as well. I think hiring people who are responsible and don't need like micromanaging with remote work, that works well. But you need to have the right people for this.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's true. I much prefer remote as well. I mean, I can't imagine going into the office every day like I used to. I mean, I remember moving down to Silicon Valley just to be closer to work on like down on the peninsula, and so I'd only have a 15-minute commute, but I still work a lot. And yeah, I just can't imagine going into the office every day because you basically go into the office, and then I remember this was starting to happen before COVID, and like half the people are on Zoom anyway.
Yeah.
So half the people are in the conference room, half the people are on the camera on the TV, and you're like, okay, well, why did I even come in? If you weren't in tech, what career would you choose?
I would really love to be in sports. Like I play a lot of sports. I'm not great at it, but I would really want to.
I love that. Yeah, me too. I'm still playing basketball at my
Yeah, me too.
advanced age. Oh, you play? Nice.
Yeah.
I'm in a men's league out here east of Sacramento, and
Oh,
we got a
nice.
good group of guys here. We have an over 35 league, and I'm not the oldest in the league, but I'm starting to be.
Maybe you'll be
uh,
the youngest in the next one. It always
Yeah, in the
works
over
like that.
50, over 45 league pretty soon, or the over 50 league. Yeah, exactly. I'd dominate in the over 50 league. That's funny. What's one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self?
I mean, I think just don't take this too seriously. There are like
Mm,
the lows just passed away, and so does the highs. So, I mean, just enjoy the journey. Right
yeah.
now, I'm pretty happy because the company is in a great place, but last year it wasn't. And I still was like not in a state of depression or anything. Just working every day, trying to make progress, just continue to do that irrespective of
Yeah,
how the mood of the day is. I think that's important thing to figure out for yourself.
that's tough. That's tough. What's your favorite productivity tool?
GPT, it has really done wonders for me. Even like drafting legal contracts, the first versions of that, at least, it really saved me because I had to get one out the next day and it was like PM in the night. So I didn't really have any time to get lawyers or anyone involved. So beat legal contracts, beat content writing, beat code. This like is a really
Yeah.
big time saver
Well,
for me.
ChatGPT can score in the top 10 percentile now of on the bar exam. It's like a combined score of 297, which is like 90th percentile.
I wouldn't
That
be
is absolutely
surprised.
crazy.
You know
Yeah.
what I was surprised by? That the contract that I sent was passed without any reviews, and I was so
Yeah.
scared. I just wanted it to be good enough that I can send the second copy to our legal team, but it just went through. And then I
Yeah. The
thought
legal team's
maybe
like, yeah,
it's,
that looks good.
yeah, I mean, I think it's just confusing enough that it works, and that's pretty much I think what is needed for legal.
I use it for everything. I use it for everything. Like a LP will say, hey, they have a question on some arcane part of the LPA or something, right? And I'll say, chat, I'll plug my whole LPA in and I'll say, hey, this LP has this question. How should I respond? And it gives me like this like perfect cogent response. And I'm like, yep, that makes sense. And it just saves me like the headache, the 10 or 20 minutes of reading through and trying to figure out how to respond. Instead, it takes me a
Exactly.
minute. So it just makes you like 10 times more efficient at least on all the
Yeah.
word-based kind of things. And I'll do it with safe documents, right? Like a founder will send me
Yeah.
a safe and I'm like, I don't know if this is a standard safe. Put it into the chat GPT. What I'm the investor here and the founder just sent me the safe. Like, is there anything in here I need to be aware of? I'm like, oh yeah, he crushes you down to common here on the conversion. Oh, like I don't want that. I want non-participating preferred shares. And like, so like there's so many cool things that it does. It just makes you so much more efficient.
Maybe I'll use ChatGPT first and then send you the next one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I used it to write this outline for the podcast, right? I'm like, okay, I got Royal coming on, and here's his LinkedIn profile. I invested, and blah blah blah. It just writes me this perfect outline, and then I can prep for the podcast in a minute or two, rather than
Nice.
spend an hour like reading through and writing an outline. And
And you know what? I
are you a
just
more
fed that to the ChatGPT and got the responses out as well.
there you go. Yeah, this is who I am, and here's my resume, and here's like my pitch deck, and like I'm going on this podcast. Here's the outline he gave me. Write nice responses to help me prep for this. Like it just eventually we're just having our agents talk to our agents. It's kind of like the replicant version of Brian and Royal doing the podcast. And
And when
you won't be able to tell.
and when the video generation kicks in, we don't even need to be aware.
I'm waiting. I mean, if I could hire like a venture capital analyst right now, like I could hire somebody here in California, that would be tons of money, 10, 15, 20,000 a month, whatever it is.
Yeah.
If I could pay AI to do almost as good of a job for 1,000 a month, 2,000 a month, my willingness to pay for that kind of agent analyst that can like scour pitch decks and Crunchbase and like read updates I'm like just writing a newsletter for my venture fund takes days to read through all the updates, figure out what people need, and like I like it. It's fun to kind of track progress and stuff. Anyway, speaking of tech trends, what's the most exciting tech trend right now?
I think like it's really hard to move away from the AI trend. I think there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of faff as well, but there are lots of valuable things. And within AI,
Yeah,
the AI agents trend is something I really believe in. So just if to give you some statistic, if you take like a GPT-2 model and just ask it questions whether the response that you have given are they correct or not, maybe this is not correct, maybe this, if you just prompt it further, it will perform better than GPT-4. So building correct agents and breaking down the problem into smaller chunks for these LLMs to understand, I think that's how we'll reach to a much higher level and not just by upgrading the foundation model. So I think a lot of
yeah,
people should be working on it. We are working on it. I think that's where it will go.
yeah. I mean, it's so exciting. I think we're probably going into the trough of disillusionment with AI. I'm starting to hear like AI is slowing down and it's not all it's cracked up to be, and we've overinvested in foundational models. I'm starting to hear that kind of chatter, which tells me like we've gone past the peak a bit. And now we're kind of going into the trough of like, this isn't going to work out. It turns out this is really hard. And, meanwhile, we're adding like an order of magnitude compute every year to it. And, the algorithms are getting more efficient. And we're wiring up agentic workflows to it and kind of reasoning skills. And did you read the situational awareness paper by Leopold from
No,
OpenAI?
not really. Not really.
Yeah,
Not yet.
he basically talks about kind of the decade ahead is the subtitle, and it's really interesting. He talks about, he calls them ooms, right? Orders of magnitude, counting the ooms of AGI, and just how fast that we're just adding ooms, orders of magnitude of compute and bandwidth and algorithmic efficiency and all that stuff is just happening. And people just kind of look at stuff and they're like, oh yeah, it's been a year. I don't see a lot of change. But people kind of, they overestimate what we can do in a year, and they underestimate what we can do in like 5 years. And so I think
Exactly.
in 5 years, things will be fundamentally different.
I think so. Like even the smaller changes, maybe the end user doesn't notice it that much. But in the last 6 months, we have upgraded the model 3 times from GPT-3, 3.5, 4.0, and then Claude Sonnet 3.5. And every time we do that, there's something remarkable that we just come across, that the context size, it's now able to understand much larger messages. It's able to now handle these type of situations. So when they keep on compounding for a long time, I think that's when people will be surprised.
Yeah, I think I think I have the singularity is nearer right there. Kurzweil's new book, which I'm not quite done with, but I read his book 20 years ago, and people just, he says in the book, people think in linear steps, right? We're just evolved to think,
Mm,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. But we're doubling, right? We're going 2, 4, 8, 16,
yeah.
and now we're starting to double really big computational numbers. And the doublings aren't like going from 2 to 4; they're like going from 1 billion to 2 billion, or 1 trillion to 2 trillion. These are
Mm.
much, much bigger jumps every time we make a leap now in compute and capacity and all that stuff. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
I'm a morning person now since I became a dad because that's
Yeah,
no longer
that'll do it.
optional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of went through that whole cycle because I have 3 kids that are much older now. My youngest is almost 8. And yeah, I'm definitely a night owl. I like to stay up late. And then when I had young children, got to go to bed early, wake up early with the kids, right?
Yeah.
They're getting up at 6, 7 in the morning. And now
Yeah.
I'm back to like sleeping in. I just got up at 8:45. And I stayed for 1 o'clock in the morning last night. So like I'm back to like where I was. That's like my normal state, is going to bed at like midnight or 1 a.m. But thank you so
Like
much for coming on the. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I used to think like 8 a.m. was early. That was my earlier morning time. But now my daughter thinks 5:30 is the right time. So that's a bit of a change.
You got to find the right balance between like bedtime and wake up time.
Yeah.
It's around 8:39. That was like kind of the right time for me to put the kids to bed, because then I'd have an hour or two, and I'd go to bed, and they'd wake up at like 6:37. I remember that was kind of like the right ratio, but everybody finds their own kind of timing. Thanks for coming on. It was great to have you. Where can people find out more about you, follow you, and CodeParrot?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. That's where you would want to reach me and would love to be connected over there.
Great. So yeah, find Royal Jain on LinkedIn and search for CodeParrot there, especially if you're building front end UI. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.